Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where this finds you, and a warm welcome to this second webinar in the series of events that UNIDIR is organising with our colleagues in UNODA, but also with the Friends of the Chair and the Chair of the BWC Working Group. These webinars are intended to support the ongoing activities of the BWC Working Group and stimulate thinking and discussion around a number of important topics during the intersessional period. You can find more details about this series through the links that my colleague will be posting in the chat. And from the outset, I should let everybody know that this event is being recorded and the recording will be made available online in the coming days. For the purpose of the discussion today, we're going to be looking at confidence building measures and transparency. I should say, to provide a bit of context, it's fairly clear CBMs are not a substitute for verification. They can play an important role in preventing or reducing the occurrence of ambiguities, doubts, and suspicions, among a number of other functions. So to learn more about this, I'm delighted to say we have a great panel of speakers who are going to guide us through CBM-related issues, perhaps starting more conceptually before looking at the international policy approaches and then getting down to the national level. I will begin the panel shortly, and this will be followed by a question and answer session in which we welcome input from all of you using the Q&A function in Zoom. But before that, however, I'm delighted to be able to give the floor to Ambassador Flávio Damico, the permanent representative of Brazil to the Conference on Disarmament, and the chair of the BWC Working Group, who's going to provide some opening remarks. And with that, Ambassador, thank you for joining us. The screen is yours, sir.
Thank you so much, James. Following in your footsteps, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on the time zones people find themselves. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here today. And I wish to start by expressing my gratitude to UNIDIR for organizing this series of events, and particularly today's event. UNIDIR dedication to facilitating these vital discussions on confidence building measures significantly enhances our collective efforts under the BWC. And again, I reiterate my thanks for your continued support. Last week's seminar, unfortunately, I was not able to attend. It was a webinar on S&T mechanism. Unfortunately, I was involved in other commitments away from Geneva, and I was not part of it. But it has been highly recommended to me in view of the fact that strong scientific input was showcased in terms of objective experimentation of possibilities for the constitution of a mechanism on S&T. We in the BWC working group, we certainly will need this type of input, as it would enable people, let's say, to de-dramatize certain questions and try to have, I would say, a more technical approach to it. We are in dire need of making progress soon. I mean, and actually, I might dare say that this is perhaps one of the last opportunities that we have to enable the Biological Weapons Conventions to live up to its promises. It has been quite some time that we have not been able to agree to results, and then we have to have a very pragmatic approach to all topics that are under our very wide agenda. Regarding the webinar of today, I wish to extend my appreciation to the Friends of the Chair of CBMs, Mr. Angel Horner from Peru and Mr. Laurent Masmejean from Switzerland, for their contributions to the topic within the working group so far, as well as for all the effort that they put in conceiving this upcoming webinar. I also wish to extend my congratulations to Mr. Matthew Shearer from Johns Hopkins, Bloomberg School of Public Health, for his generous research, which offers critical insights into the benefits and limitations of our current CBM system. We look forward to his overview and understanding on how we can enhance our implementation strategies. Also to Ms. Lebogang Phihlela, Deputy Director of the Non-Proliferation Secretariat at the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition of South Africa, for her sharing of experiences in developing CBMs within the South African context, we are eager to hear her recommendations for effective CBM deployment. Ms. Sansonuk Kyumbunsan, Deputy Director of the UN Political and Security Affairs Division of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Lao People's Democratic Republic, for her overview of the CBM process in Laos. Any good practices she can share will be greatly appreciated by all of us seeking to enhance our own systems. And finally, to our dear Alex Lampalzer, Deputy Head of the BWC ISU, for his perspectives on the global implementation of CBMs and how the ISU can support these efforts further. Regarding the evolution and current role of CBMs, since their introduction in the second review conference in 1986, quite some time ago, CBMs have evolved from tools designed to reduce doubts and suspicions to key mechanisms for ensuring transparency. Today's CBMs are more than just a transparency tool. They are an integral part in building confidence in compliance with the BWC. And the question that I would like to put to you as a further input to your discussion is that what do we want from CBMs for them to be what they could become in a strengthened BWC framework? Regarding challenges and opportunities of CBMs, I would like to point out that despite their significant benefits, CBMs face challenges that limit their full potential. The landscape of biological research and global security has been transformed dramatically, presenting new types of threats and capabilities that ideally should be addressed by CBMs. And the question that I would like to put to the participants is, do the current forms fully reflect the modern biological and geopolitical environments, or should we consider adaptations in order to enhance their relevance and effectiveness? Also, regarding participation and addressing barriers to participation in the CBM process, of course, we are very much committed to them. They are crucial. However, it's concerning that still slightly less than half of the BWC states parties do not participate regularly. We just crossed the 50% mark very recently. This low engagement, it's a low level of engagement, undermines the potential of CBMs to offer comprehensive insights into global compliance and treaty implications. So the question that we could look into is, should reporting be a strictly voluntary activity within the BWC? How can we best address this low engagement? The other topic that the working group will eventually need to tackle is proposals for enhancing the effectiveness of the CBMs. So questions that we have in mind that are being raised by many participants is, how could we improve participation and the overall effectiveness of the CBMs? Is it worth simplifying the CBM submission process? Can we encourage partial submissions? Any data is better than no data. This is one thing that we have to address. And how can we increase the perceived value of the CBMs? And also another issue that we might have in mind is the cross-pollination between the CBMs and international cooperation and assistance, particularly for low and low and middle income countries, so that we could then improve their level of participation in the submission of CBMs. So as my closing remarks, I encourage all participants to think critically about how we can enhance the CBM framework to better serve its original purpose while adapting it to the current and future biological threat landscape, which has been changed dramatically in the last 20 years. So these are my initial comments, and I wish you a very fruitful discussion in the seminar. And then again, James Revel, many thanks for your engagement in this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you for your kind words and the encouragement. the continued support of you and indeed your team around these webinars. Thank you also for a series of quite big questions for our panel to tackle, and I think that leads quite nicely into our first presentation. Matthew, Matt, I don't think we'd expect you to tackle all 5 questions, but as Ambassador Damico pointed out, you are the co-author of a recent study on BWC confidence building measures. So I wonder whether perhaps you could start by providing a bit of an overview and then perhaps getting into some of the possible policy implications for the working group that emerged from your study. And sorry, I should also point out, Matthew Shearer is an associate scholar with the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And with that, thank you for joining us, Matt. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Jamie, and good morning, everyone, or good morning for me anyway. As Jamie said, I'm Matt Shearer from the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. Before we begin, I do want to acknowledge the hard work by the rest of our team, Dr. Gigi Gronball, Christina Potter, Rachel Vahey, and Nick Munbees. And I want to thank Ambassador Damico and the Friends of the Chair, as well as Jamie and the UNIDIR team for the opportunity to participate in today's panel. I don't think I'm going to be able to tackle all of the questions posed by Ambassador Damico, but I will be able to touch on at least a small subset of the findings from our recent study on how to improve BWC confidence building measures. If you are interested in our methodology or a full analysis, we did recently post a preprint manuscript, and I'm happy to share that with anyone who's interested. And the slide deck that we used for our side event at the December 2023 working group meeting is available on the meeting website. So this study, our goal was to better understand the purpose, the value, and limitations of CBMs, and to identify concrete opportunities to strengthen them, specifically to support the state's parties in their efforts as part of the working group. We generated our findings based on direct input from BWC delegations, as well as international civil society experts. We interviewed 53 experts from 24 countries, including from 22 BWC delegations. In terms of the CBM's purpose and value, the interviewees largely focused on the state's parties' original intent in developing them, specifically to increase information sharing and transparency regarding biological activities and capacities, with the ultimate goal of increasing confidence in BWC compliance. In addition to the confidence building component of CBMs, numerous interviewees indicated that states parties can also benefit directly simply by participating. The process of compiling the requested information helps strengthen relationships with relevant partners in both government and private sector, and it helps raise awareness of national capabilities and gaps in legislation or regulatory systems that could ultimately improve national implementation. Additionally, sharing information about biological activities, priorities, and national implementation can help other states parties identify potential targets for international cooperation and assistance. So participating states parties can also improve their ability to gain assistance under Article 10. And I'm sure other panelists will be in a much better position to comment on these particular benefits based on their experience with the CBM process. While CBMs present multiple opportunities for states parties to benefit, there are also well-known limitations. We are all too familiar with the challenges of low annual participation. And while we've observed significant increases in the number of annual submissions, particularly the last several years, as Ambassador Damico mentioned, nearly half of states parties still do not participate on a regular basis. This could be a result of numerous issues, including the high cost-benefit ratio for participating. If states parties don't feel that their CBMs are providing value, it's difficult to justify allocating the effort required to compile that information. Additionally, there remains disagreement regarding the nature of states parties' political commitment to submit CBMs, specifically whether that means that states parties are obligated or encouraged to participate. Another major barrier is the substantial effort required for a state party to submit its first CBM. Multiple interviewees emphasized that the first CBM is considerably more difficult to complete, since states parties must basically start from scratch without the processes and relationships in place that they would need to complete that endeavor. It's much easier to update a previous submission than it is to start with a blank page. The second major issue is concerns about the quality of CBM submissions, including the completeness, accuracy, and the level of detail. Multiple interviewees emphasized that in the absence of a legally binding obligation to participate, states parties only submit what they want to submit. In particular, state parties are unlikely to provide any incriminating information or information that is not already available via other sources. And there are concerns that some states parties are inadvertently or deliberately omitting information about their biological activities, facilities, and programs. The CBM forms themselves, as Ambassador Damico mentioned, also factor into this issue of quality. Because the forms are largely unchanged over the last several decades, there is concern among states parties and civil society experts that the forms themselves no longer effectively reflect are not able to effectively reflect modern biological capabilities and threats. And finally, the dearth of analysis of CBM content limits their ability to actually provide insight into states parties' biological activities and capabilities, which in turn limits their ability to increase confidence and compliance. There is no formal capacity or process to review CBM submissions, whether under the umbrella of the BWC itself or by states parties. States parties, BWC delegations face countless competing demands for their resources, and even well-resourced delegations must be selective in terms of which CBMs they're able to review. And only a fraction of states parties have publicly available CBMs, which limits the civil society ability to provide supplemental analytic capacity. So with those in mind, our principal recommendations focus on improving the cost benefit for states parties. In this context, the cost refers both to the effort required to compile and submit CBMs, as well as the effort required to make use of that CBM data or to even access that CBM data. And the benefit refers to both the contribution of CBMs to increasing confidence and transparency, as well as the direct benefit that states parties can gain by participating in CBMs. Importantly, states parties can take multiple different approaches to strengthening CBMs, and whether they choose to start with improving participation or improving the value is really a mutually reinforcing cycle. For example, improving the use of CBM data increases its value, which incentivizes participation, which generates more data, which further increases the value, and so on. And notably, we identified a broad scope of options for states parties to strengthen CBMs. This includes unilateral or bilateral activities, as well as multilateral or regional activities, all the way up to those that would ultimately require consensus agreement. Additionally, we identified informal and formal options, including those that can be implemented on a voluntary basis, and those that would, again, require consensus agreement to make formal changes to the current CBM system. We provided a number of examples of these types of activities and options in our full report, but there are a few that I think are worth highlighting today. First, reducing the burden of completing the first CBM could increase participation. But we found that states parties that submit their first CBM are more likely to continue participating in the future. So helping states parties to get over that initial barrier could have a longer-term impact on improving participation. States parties can engage through bilateral or regional efforts, such as the CBM workshops we've heard about in recent years, to provide direct support or share experiences and lessons based on their own CBM process. States parties could also utilize a stepwise process to complete that first CBM, as described by a recent working paper led by Japan. This would encourage states parties to start with a partial submission, such as a single CBM form, and then build toward a full submission over time, which would spread that initial burden out over several years, rather than requiring them to do it all at once. Additionally, we encourage states parties to share their CBM experiences, particularly to emphasize the direct benefits of going through that process, which could further incentivize other states parties to participate. And crucially, all of these activities can be implemented on an informal or voluntary basis, which would avoid the need for a consensus agreement. At the formal end of the spectrum, states parties could revisit the CBM forms themselves. This would obviously require consensus agreement, but it could provide the opportunity to eliminate forms that no longer serve their intended purpose, or add new information that could provide more meaningful insight into relevant biological activities. Ideally, this would increase the value provided by CBM submissions while eliminating the effort required to compile information that's no longer particularly helpful. There are also a myriad of opportunities to establish analytic capacity for CBMs. Again, in the formal context, states parties could agree to expand the mandate and the resources of the ISU, which could provide a centralized review and reporting function. Or they could establish something like an annual meeting or a working group to share information and improve clarity in a more collaborative setting. As always, we encourage states parties to make their CBMs public. And that, again, that's a decision that they can make unilaterally. Interestingly, several of our interviewees commented that states parties may not necessarily be aware that their submissions are restricted. Their governments may have made that determination years ago and then never revisited that debate. So we encourage states parties with restricted submissions to reconsider that decision, and they may conclude that there's no longer a need to restrict that information. We also commented on opportunities to update the ECBM platform to streamline the submission process and provide capabilities such as translation of CBM submissions or an improved search functionality. And I'm looking forward to hearing from Alex about the ECBM updates made earlier this year. Obviously, the close relationship between CBMs, compliance, and verification poses additional challenges, but it also presents opportunities to make progress on priorities for many states parties. While some will argue that strengthening the CBMs could preclude negotiations on a treaty protocol or verification regime, progress in these areas are not mutually exclusive. Strengthening CBMs could enable states parties to take intermediate steps on issues around compliance while they work toward a treaty protocol and verification regime. And states parties have a variety of informal options on the table that can facilitate progress on CBMs without needing to reach consensus. And importantly, some of the options we identified for strengthening CBMs could also have positive impact on other BWC priorities, including S&T review, international cooperation and assistance, and national implementation. So with that, I'll wrap up my remarks. Thank you again for your attention, and looking forward to our other panelists' remarks and the upcoming discussion.
Thank you very much, Matt. I think that sets us up really well for our next speaker, and also congratulations, because I think you tackled 3 or 4 of Ambassador Damico's list of questions. I should also note that I think my colleague Maria has put a link to the recent study which Matthew is referring to, which is now in the chat. We will get to questions shortly, but before that, I'm delighted to now turn the floor to Dr. Alex Lampalzer. Alex is the Deputy Head of the BWC Implementation Support Unit, and is going to provide an overview of the new ECBM platform that UNODA has developed, as well as a bit of an insight into some wider trends and some opportunities related to CBMs. Alex, thank you for joining us. The screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Jamie, for your kind introduction. At the outset, I'd like to thank UNIDIR and the Friends of the Chair for the invitation to speak at this webinar. And I hope to be also able to address some of the questions posed by Ambassador Damico in my presentation. Next slide, please. Let me start off by presenting first the new CBM platform. The Implementation Support Unit launched the earlier and first version of the CBM platform back in 2019. Since then, more than 5 years have passed, and a major upgrade of the underlying software became necessary. This now in turn provided an opportunity to create a new application that is in full compliance with the latest UNIT and also web design standards. Moreover, it also presented a chance to incorporate new technical features and functionalities based on suggestions made by states parties. The CBM platform serves as the online repository for all CBM reports submitted since 1987. As per guidance received from states parties, the website consists of 2 parts, of a restricted part accessible only to states parties, as well as a publicly accessible segment. In line with the UN principle of multilingualism, the user interface has been translated into all 6 official languages of the United Nations. As of May 2024, almost 400 users from states parties are registered on the platform, and states parties that do not yet have access to the website are requested to contact us at bwc@un.org. The development took place over a time frame of roughly 10 months between May 2023 and March early this year, and you can see on the slide the key development stages. Let me also take this opportunity and express our appreciation to the United Kingdom for funding the development of the new platform. Next slide, please. What I'd like to do now is to illustrate briefly the new platform and some key features with some screenshots. On the left-hand side, you can see the landing page, and at its heart is an interactive map that indicates the total number of submissions and last submission made. Moreover, one can browse either by state party, also search by calendar year. On the right-hand side, the screenshot informs about individual state party profiles, and they provide an overview of the submission made, including submission year, submission date, and report language. Next slide, please. Now, if users wish to drill further down on an individual state party profile for a particular submission year, the user can get an overview of the reporting made under the declaration form 0, which you can see on the left-hand side. Furthermore, the user can download via the action button the report. On the right-hand side now, you can see the screenshot for downloading or using the machine translation feature. Let me also, however, clarify that these translations do not have any official status. Some content may not be accurately translated simply due to limitations of the translation software, and the option to download a machine translation depends in the first place on the readability and the format of the original submission received. Next slide, please. The CBM platform also offers a simplified online submission mechanism where registered users can upload the CBM report as a PDF file and fill in the online form 0, and you can see that on the screenshots here. Also in the center, you can see that video tutorials have been prepared to guide the user in key process steps. On the right-hand side, and that's also a new feature, you can see the multiple statistics, and they cover inter alia CBM report submissions by months, the total number of submissions, the ratio between publicly accessible and restricted reports. Usually around 2/3 of the reports are restricted. A pie chart on the report language, and approximately 2/3 of the reports are submitted in English. And last but not least, also multiple pie charts for Form A to G. Next slide, please. Another new feature that you can see is also the platform has a so-called Documents tab, where users can download some documents and data. First, one can download the ISU background document on CBMs, which was prepared for the 9th review conference. Second, users can download the overall submission statistic that is shared together with the annual CBM reminder letter on 15th of January. And third, users can download a reporting summary for a given year, which is shared by the ISU in its annual report as a separate annex. Next slide, please. Last but not least, the platform has an online feedback form and also features an optional notification mechanism for registered users. Either one can receive on a monthly basis information about newly submitted reports, or whenever a report is being submitted. Next slide, please. Now let me turn to the second part of my presentation and focus on some submission trends between 2019 and 2024. Overall, and on a positive note, one can identify a clear increase in CBM submissions. While considerable efforts, of course, still need to be invested, the submission rate has increased from 45% in 2019 to 56% in 2023. As you can see also on the chart, there is a positive trend also for 2024, and there's grounds for optimism that we'll see this year an even higher number. Of course, and as Matthew pointed out, besides simply increasing the number of CBM submissions, it's also equally important to look at the quality of the CBM reports. As indicated by the blue bars, roughly half of all states parties submit their CBM reports by 15th of April. and the other roughly 50% submit during the remainder of the calendar year. As indicated in the reddish bars, one can see the trend concerning the use of the optional online submission mechanism. That 2019 was the first year when this was made available, with 9 states parties that have made use of this option. And back now in 2024, almost a third of all states parties that have submitted so far have used this new simplified feature. Last but not least, also another positive trend. 14 states parties have made their first CBM submissions since 2019, thereby decreasing the number of those states parties that have never submitted a CBM report from 58 to 44. And let me also take this opportunity to congratulate Sierra Leone and Venezuela for the first CBM report submissions made in 2024. Next slide, please. Now, one might wonder what are the reasons or potential reasons for the increase in CBM submissions over the last couple of years. First, CBMs have been addressed in more recent intersessional programs as a biennial agenda item in 2012 to 2013, and subsequently between 2018 and 2020 under the meetings of experts number 3, and of course now in the working group. These meetings, I believe, have drawn attention to the importance of CBMs and also the benefits. CBMs are the only formal tool under the BWC for promoting transparency and building confidence among states parties. Another potential reason, I think, is that in the last few years, we received considerable funding for conducting capacity building activities. And as you can see on the slide, just since January 2023, nearly 500 experts from more than 100 states parties or signatories were familiarized and received training on CBM matters. And we are grateful to the global partnership, the European Union, Canada, France, UK, and the US for funds received in support of these activities. And I believe also a third reason is that we have taken a more proactive approach and steps towards follow-up measures with states parties, which have also helped to increase the number of CBM report submissions. Next slide. Now let me at the end just address a few thoughts concerning assistance that is available in the preparation of CBMs. There are multiple options really available to support states parties in this process. They can be either in person or virtual and cover also different methodologies. Let me also inform you that just very recently, the ISU has received funding from the United Kingdom for conducting CBM capacity building activities later this year and in early 2025, and we're grateful for that. Another option is, of course, direct collaboration among states parties, and I guess we'll hear later from our speakers from South Africa and from Laos. And last but not least, I'd like to inform you that 3 states parties, Cuba, UK, and US, have made assistance offers under Article 10. And at this stage, we have 3 active CBM requests registered in the Article 10 database. All 3 states parties were contacted earlier this year, and we are right now actively engaging with 2 of the states parties to address their request. Let me conclude now with a reference to the final document of the 7th Review Conference, which urged states parties in a position to do so to provide CBM assistance to those states parties requesting it. This concludes my presentation. I look forward to any questions that you might have, and thank you, and back to you, Jamie.
Many thanks, Alex. It's good to hear on some of the progress and, to use your phrase, grounds for optimism, which I think are always welcome. So thank you. There will be space for questions, as I indicated. There's a couple are starting to trickle in, and we will get to them. But now, though, I am delighted to welcome Lebogang Phihlela, who's Deputy Director of the Non-Proliferation Secretariat at the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition of South Africa. I also understand that Lebogang was also served as chair of the third meeting of experts on strengthening national implementation in 2019 as part of quite a long-standing history of expertise and contribution to the BWC. In that regard, I'm delighted you've been able to make the time to join us, and I'm hoping you could provide an overview of your experience in the development of CBMs in the South African context, and of course, any recommendations you may have. With that, Lebogang, the floor is yours, madam.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks again, Jamie, for inviting us to this event so we can at least share our views from a South African perspective on how we develop CBM and the whole process of the coordination and compilation, which is what I'm going to cover in my talk. And I thank you again for organizing these events. I think they're quite helpful, and I'm sure they will fit into the formal BWC meetings. So let me just go into my slides. Okay, so this first slide just covers, So this first slide just pretty much covers what the content of my presentation is going to be. And then it also highlights like key mechanisms that we have in place that assist us with the development and coordination of confidence building measures. So I'll cover each of them in the slides that I'm just going to follow now. Okay, so the first part is the legislative framework, which assisted greatly with regards to the compilation of confidence building measures. So South Africa has a combined system of control where all treaties and conventions or regimes related to weapons of mass destruction are controlled under one legislation, which is the Non-Proliferation of Weapons of Mass Destruction Act. So that is our primary legislation. And in addition to the primary legislation, we also have secondary legislation that further implements the provisions of the primary act. And what I wanted to highlight in this slide is the key provisions that are in our primary legislation that sort of assist us with putting in systems in place that helps us with the process of coordinating and compiling the confidence building measures. And those are the three that I just want to highlight, because it's because of those three that are there that we're able to establish the systems that we currently have. The first one is that the primary legislation prescribes the establishment of a national authority. So that is our national contact point. Our national authority is the South African Council for the Non-Proliferation of Weapons of Mass Destruction. So they are tasked with the overall responsibility of overseeing the non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction in the Republic. And in addition to that, it also includes implementing the obligations that come with being a member of these different international instruments. So the Non-Proliferation Council is our national contact point, which I'm going to speak to in the next slide. And the council is also mandated to establish committees and under the different control areas to assist it in achieving its objective. So in terms of the different multi-stakeholder forums that we have established, there's a legislative mandate given to the council to establish those committees. So the committee that was established particularly to deal with BWC issues is called the Biological Weapons Working Committee, which I will speak to later as well. And another provision that's also important in there is that there is a legislative provision that says that companies or facilities that deal with controlled items are mandated to provide us with declaration or any information should the council request. I mean, we generally don't have an issue with getting information from our facility, but having this provision at least gives us the leeway to take any action should we come into a situation where a facility doesn't necessarily want to share information or give us information that needs to go into the confidence building measures. So this slide at least just gives the legislative framework of the systems that we have in place. So the national contact point, I mentioned that it is the council. So when it comes to BWC issues, the issues are cross-cutting. So there will need to be liaison with different stakeholders. So it is important to have a designation of a person that's going to be specifically responsible for dealing with confidence building measures. So with us, it's sort of different. So I mentioned the council, which is now an institution, a national authority. That is the national contact point at a high level. But what I wanted to highlight as well, that even within the council itself, there is a person specifically designated to drive the whole process of CBM because of the multi-stakeholder liaison or engagement that would need to happen. So although we're a national authority, there is no way that by ourselves we will be able to complete the forms. So they will still need to be liaison with different stakeholders so they can provide you with the forms. So they should ideally be a person that is specifically designated to lead that process. So that's what we have done in our case as well. There's a person who was specifically designated to be responsible for CBM, particularly because of the multi-stakeholder engagement that has to be there. Somebody needs to start the process and consult the different institutions that have to give you information that goes into the forms. And another thing that I wanted to highlight on this slide is that when it also comes with our liaison or communication with UNODA, although we have not designated a specific person to be responsible for CBMs, when it comes to the nomination of a national contact point, the information that is sent to the ISU, we didn't just put the information of that one person. So we put the information of all the other technical officials that are there in our chief directorate, and that's pretty much for continuity. So if the one designated person is not around and communication is sent out by UNODA, at least the other officials in the office will receive that communication. And if there's anything that needs to be actioned, then there will be people that will be able to do that. Okay, so this is the multi-stakeholder forum that I mentioned. Because of the how cross-cutting the BWC issues are, and because of the acknowledgement that they will have to be liaison with different stakeholders, the first thing that we acknowledged when we were establishing a multi-stakeholder forum was to make sure that it is composed of different representatives. So the BWWC, it's not just made up of government departments. We also have state-owned entities, and we have industry representatives in there as well. And we can also appoint people on the committee purely based on their expertise. They don't necessarily have to belong to any institution. So the BWWC serves as the primary source of our data collection. But I just want to highlight here that the committee doesn't only discuss the CBM, it also discusses all other issues related to the implementation of the BWC. So the working papers that get circulated would also be discussed at the BWWC, so at the committee level, and also issues related to control. So our legislation will also get discussed there. So the committee doesn't only meet when it's time for us to complete or coordinate the confidence building measures. And I think what also assists us in the process of coordinating the process is that The institutions that give information that goes into the forms are also represented in this forum that we have, which makes it easier. So you obviously will have your Department of Health and Department of your Agriculture, and they would be primarily important when you give information related to your disease outbreaks. So we have our highest biocontainment facility is also there, and also the facility that's responsible for the National Biological Defense Research is also there. So it also helps when we have the institutions that have to provide you in the forms represented at the committee level. But you don't just want to limit it to them. You also want to get a hold of what is actually happening on the ground, what biological developments are actually happening, or that governments might not necessarily be aware of, and hence the importance of also having industry representatives there as well, so they can also advise us on any developments taking place on the ground. Okay, so this slide, I'm just going to speak about the challenges, lessons learned, and best practices. So I think those key mechanisms that are highlighted, having someone that specifically lead that process, somebody needs to be responsible, somebody needs to initiate the process of developing the confidence building measures. Having a multi-stakeholder forum where you get everybody together and you have an opportunity to actually discuss the CBMs, the information that goes into it, and the developments that has probably taken place that might need to be reported on. And of course, legislation also helps in situations where you might get institutions that are reluctant to actually provide you with the information. So in terms of challenges, and our best practices, what helps us is the establishment of that multi-stakeholder forum, as I mentioned. And I think it also works in our favor that we didn't just limit it to compiling CBMs or coordinating CBMs. We deal about everything related to the BWC. But I think what we need to acknowledge is we have created a system where everybody can get together and discuss it. But it shouldn't just end there, because even that forum can have its limitations. Just because I said that, and especially because I said it is our primary, the primary source of us collecting the data. So we need to acknowledge that there are limitations that can also be there, and we do acknowledge that, and hence we do a skills gap analysis of the committees to address the deficiency. So there is leeway for us to assess if there are certain skills that might be lacking on the committee. So if we identify that there is a particular skill or expertise that is lacking, the Constitution and mandate gives us provision for us to actually bring in that particular skill. And that also links to the challenge that I highlighted, that sometimes you establish the forums, but they might not be as 100% effective as you want them to be, because they pretty much depend on the people that you're going to have there. So one of the challenges could be that you can have representation that is not relevant. And that has also happened in South Africa's case. But I think what we are going to do going forward is this points that are highlighted here. That we're going to be specific in terms of the representation that we want. Because usually when we talk about multi-stakeholder forum, the first stage, once you decide that you want to have a multi-stakeholder forum, then you'd have to identify the department or the institutions that you want represented. But we usually stop there. But over the years, we actually realized the importance of putting in the section that you'd also like to be represented. And I know sometimes it's bureaucracy, because we don't want to prescribe to the DG who should be on the committee, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a person. So it can be a section. So like in Department of Health, you would want somebody that from communicable diseases that will give you information about outbreaks. And we would want somebody that deals with the registration of laboratories. So going forward, to address the challenge that we've had of not having people that are entirely relevant, when we appoint the committee and we send out letters requesting for nominations, we are going to be specific, at least at the section level, to put in place, to indicate in there the section that we'd like represented. So I think what I wanted to highlight is the importance of actually not just stopping at the department, also identifying the particular section or units that you'd like represented. Of course, that's if you actually know. And this usually comes after sometimes of being involved in the implementation process where you now know the particular sections that you'd want represented. But if you do know, then it helps in the beginning to be specific and actually put that in there. And one of the challenges that can also be there with the coordination of CBMs is well, can be a challenge depending on how you look at it, but it can be addressed, considering the operational requirements of other departments. Because now you'll be consulting departments and requesting information from them, you do not necessarily know what the operational requirements would be. So sometimes some departments or institutions would request a high-level letter, so a letter from the Director General of our department to their Director General in order for them to give us the information that goes into the forms. And there just needs to be an acknowledgement that if you have such a case, that would mean that when you coordinate or when you start the process of actually compiling the CBMs, you would have to start earlier on to cater for such a situation, because you don't know how long the Director General will sign the letter, how long it's going to cascade down to the official. So then there's going to be a longer process that one would have to follow if such operational requirements are there. But over time, such red tape actually falls off, but I think that's because you've now built a relationship with the representatives that you have at the committee. But that was another aspect that made things a bit challenging in the beginning, in a sense that we would have to start way earlier to cater for follow-ups as well. And the other point is just to say, just because we have a forum doesn't mean we as a national authority just have to be complacent and entirely rely on the forum. As I mentioned, that is also without its weaknesses, because it also depends on the people that are represented there. So it's also important for national authority to do research as well on industry and developments that are taking place. And sometimes it's just a matter of you just keeping your ear on the ground, because some of these developments that happen are some televised and publicized. So it's just something that we should take note of, that don't just leave it to the multi-stakeholder forum, also do your research as well. And also the importance of having the national implementing legislation, particularly because of that provision that I mentioned. And I did say that we generally don't have an issue, but should a situation arise where a company doesn't want to provide us with information, even after many follow-ups that you make, then there is a provision in our legislation where we can inform them that we can actually take action on this issue, and they're obligated to actually comply with the legislation and our request as well. So I think at a high level, that's sort of the mechanisms that we have in place that assist with the development and the coordination of the confidence building measures, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Many thanks,
Jamie.
Lebogang. Many thanks. I think that's really useful, and I particularly appreciate you laying out the best practices and that the point on putting systems in place to coordinate and compile CBMs and getting individuals to drive, I think is really useful. But many thanks. I'd now like to turn to Ms. Somsanuk Keobonsan, who is the Deputy Director of the UN Political and Security Affairs Division of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Lao People's Democratic Republic. Somsanuk has been working on issues related to security and disarmament, including the BWC, for I think more than a decade now, and has considerable expertise and experience to draw from. So I'm delighted you've been able to join us, and perhaps I could also invite you to provide an overview of the process of CBM development in the Lao People's Democratic Republic, and any good practices you think are particularly useful to be aware of. And the screen is yours, madam.
Yes, good evening, everyone from Laos. And first of all, I would like to say, express my sincere thanks to UNIDIR that inviting the Lao PDR to join this just an important event, and also to get a chance to share some our good practice on the implementation of the biological weapon conventions, especially on the confidence building measures development. Next slide, please. Yeah, first of all, I would like to start with the overview of us that we ratify of the BWC and in 1973, and also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is the lead as the national contact point, and also implementation of the Biological Weapon Convention as well. And also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is tasked as a national coordination with the relevant ministry and prepare the annual confidence building measures report for submission to the ISU BWC every year. We think that the confidence building measure play an important roles in promoting transparency. That's why we so far we had submit our CBM report. Like we had submit 4 CBM report to the ISU BWC. Next slide, please. Yeah, in this slide, I would like to share with you on our national coordination framework that, as you can see on my slide, that as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is the national contact point. So we have been working, we established our national focal point from Lai agency that we have been working together with almost like 10 Lai agency ministry that you can see that we have Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, Ministry of Environment and Natural Resource, Ministry of Public and Ministry of Public Work and Transport, Ministry of Energy and Mines, and Ministry of Finance, especially the Department of Customs, and we also have the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, and also the Ministry of Education and Sport, especially that we also working with the Department of Science and also Ministry of Public and Security. Next slide, please. Yeah, apart from our national coordination framework, we also have our national biosafety and biosecurity multi-sectoral coordination system that represent from 4 ministry, the 4 main ministry, that Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, Ministry of Education and Sport, and Ministry of Defense. So they are focused on providing guidance and collaboration on matters related to the biosafety and biosecurity consideration in handling biological agents, and also they're also working on the capacity building of personnel and also the development of the legislation and guidelines related to biosafety and biosecurity of the Lao PDR as well. So this next slide, please. Yeah, this slide, I would like to give you some of our previous submission of the CBM to the Biological Weapon Convention that since the introduction of the CBM, so far that we have submit our CBM report, that 4 reports. The first one is 1995, and another one in 2009. Then after 13 years that we haven't been submit our CBM report, and then we be able to submit our 3rd report again in 2023. That is because we think that it is quite important to promoting the transparency, and also that the latest report that we will submit in last month, actually this year. And also, I think that why we be able to submit our 3rd report after like just a long time again, that I think that is because as we all know that how CBM is important for our own country, also during that the pandemic during the COVID-19 happening as well, and we see that we also need some assistance as well, especially that capacity building, I think it is important for our law agency to understand why the implementation of the Biological Weapon Convention is very important for the state party. The next slide, please. Yeah, this is I would like to show you this slide, that this is the first capacity building workshop on confidence building measure for the Biological Weapon Convention of the Lao PDR. That's why after the 13th year that we be able to submit again on 2023 that we got a chance to conduct our capacity workshop. I think it is very important that it can be the first step that to strengthening a capacity building to law agency to understand and exchange information together. The next slide, please. And at that time, we also got a chance to have the lecture by the senior expert from the EU CBI and COE, especially for the Project 62, and also the expert from the ISU BWC, and also the verdict then who can help us guide on the legislation as well. The next slide. Yeah, this is some the event that the Lao PDR, the Philippines, Japan, that working together on the side event that on the effort to strengthen the implementation of the Biological Weapon Convention in Southeast Asia. I think it is important that to work among our region, that to help engage each other and cooperation together, that to hand on training from each other. We got a chance that the Philippines was the country that have helping Lao that how to fill on the form on the CBM, that because as you probably know that the CBM form is quite very technical. Sometimes it's really hard to understand because some law agency have different understanding on the subject as well. That's why we think that working among the region for other sub-regional is very important as well. Next slide, please. Yeah, I would say that this slide that can show that this is our first regional workshop last year. That is about on promoting BWC confidence building measure in Southeast Asia. This was conducted last year in Thailand, that organized by UNODA, and I think this was one of our successful event. I would say that because of as of now from ASEAN we. Only that Vietnam have not yet submit the CBM report, but hopefully that we will see our ASEAN fellow to submit. Hopefully that this year that Vietnam will be able to submit. Then all of ASEAN that submit the CBM report, because from this workshop that we get a chance to exchange information, share some best practice, and also some challenge that some states still feel that not be able to submit, then we can learn from each other. I think this is a very good regional workshop for us as well. The next slide, please. Yeah, and then this year we the Lao PDR also got a chance to join the national workshop on the implementation of the Biological Weapon Convention in Vietnam. That we help Vietnam to how to we engage Vietnam, especially that how we can work together among the region, that that Vietnam what the challenge that they still face, and then they can take some lesson learned from the Lao PDR, that that how we can be able to resubmit our CBM report again, that we can work together. So I think that is also a good step for our region, especially for Vietnam, that they can be able to learn from Lao as well, then how we be able to submit our CBM, and then what the next step that they will do, that we can work together among our regions. Yeah, the next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, yeah, and then among Southeast Asia, then we also have our Timor-Leste colleagues that actually this event that was conducted on March this year, actually on the national workshop as well. So this is quite impressed that Timor-Leste is one of the country that I would say that they really pay attention on, that they really want to learn from the country in the region, that how you be able to submit your CBM again, and how you improve your challenge and something that you face and difficult when you're dealing with your law agency. And I'm really glad that the ISU BWC is invite Lao PDR to share some best practice, a good practice on how we can help the Timor-Leste to move forward on the first step, that they will be able to submit that CBM report. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, I would like to share with you on the good practice in relation to the CBM preparation process. Now, in order to build a good practice in relation to CBM preparations process, the Lao PDR had undertaken a number of concrete steps. First, we established the national focal point from the Lao Ministry related for the information gathering in the CBM preparation. Apart from that, as the national contact point had to conduct an internal meeting annually with the Lao agency involved for assigned responsibility and set up the deadline for gather update information and data collections. Apart from that, the national contact point had also to prepare information and data update that collect from the Lao agency, then finalize the information to fill in the CBN form. And after that, as a national contact point, we have to submit the CBM report. We had to submit, we report the CBM form to our leadership for the final approval before we submitting to the ISU BWC in 15 April every year. And also the national contact point will submit the CBM report to ISU BWC both through the permanent mission in our permanent mission in Geneva and also an electronic format directly to ISU before 15 April every year. Next slide, please. Yeah, and why is CBM important to Lao? We think that we will get a lot of benefit of the preparing CBM. That's why we resubmit our CBM report again. First, we think that our Lao agency understand more the importance of the confidence building measures and activity related to the implementation of the biological weapon conventions. And it is also give opportunity to the relevant ministry to discuss and also the exchange information through the confidence building measures submissions. And also not only for that, but it also help to identify opportunity for practical and technical cooperation, because some of our Lao agency also still need some technical support, especially when it is related to the biosafety and biosecurity. Next slide, please. Yeah, this one I would like to show you about the showcase of the achievement of the partner country in the region, including national and intra-regional capacity building success story. I think this one is the best practice for us, that especially for Lao PDR and the Philippines, that we have been working together, that we won the success story of the best national success story on the CBM submission. So this was last year in Brazil, that conducted by during the meeting of the EU CBI and COE in Brazil. Yeah. So next slide, please. So despite the some achievement, but we still face some key challenge as well. So our first challenge that is we need to increase more knowledge on the CBM preparations, because sometimes the Lao agency still don't know much why it is important for the state party to implementation of the biological weapon convention. And second thing is, we think that it is quite difficulty on filling CBN form, because different understanding from relevant agency. That is also one of our challenge, because I think CBM form is quite technical. That's why we had to translate. We got the support from the Project 62 of the EU CBIN that to help us to translate the CBM form in our own language, that will be able for our Lao agency to understand and more the substantive of the form, that they will be able to support us the information gathering as well. I think this is quite important as well. And the third one is it's quite another challenge for us, that is limited access to data sharing and some sensitive informations, because some Lao agency, they still not be able to share with us with everything when it's related to the biological when it's related to the biosafety and biosecurity. So that's why strengthening the capacity building, especially training, and give them some education on the subject is quite important as well. Then, yeah, the last one is changing the. I think the next slide. Can you keep another? I think I had another slide. Yes. Yeah, I think this is another challenge of us, that change of focal point person from relevant ministry is also one of the challenge as well, because sometimes when we have been working, especially that those who are involved in our CBM form is mostly from the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, especially on the animal laboratory, and also the Ministry of Defense, that sometimes they change the focal point person is quite hard for national contact point, especially Ministry of Foreign Affairs as well, that to get some to collect the information with them to fill in the form. So this is also some challenge that that we are facing, that I would like to share with you. So I think this is end of my presentation that I'm sharing with you guys today. So if you have any question, then I'm happy to share our best practice as much as I can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samsanuka, for joining us, particularly as I realize it's also getting quite late over there for you, so I very much appreciated it. And your points on the challenges and the benefits, I think was really useful and helpful for us to hear. I think there's a point you raised on the complexity as well of filling in forms, and this follows on a point raised by the ambassador in his opening remarks around whether we should perhaps simplify things, or perhaps there are steps which we could take to make it easier. And you mentioned translation, so that's really useful. So thank you. That concludes the set of presentations. Now we want to get your views, your input, your questions. I think we have a couple to start with, so perhaps I can start straight away with one for you, Matt. So this will also open to all, but it also links to something raised by the ambassador earlier about whether CBM should be voluntary. And the question I have is from Mohammed Zahab from Aga Khan University in Karachi, which is, why can CBMs not be made mandatory for each state party? And perhaps I could pass that to you first, Matthew, if that's okay with you, and then I'll open to others. Please, the screen yours, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an excellent question. And I think that's a challenge that states parties have been facing since probably the very onset of CBMs. I can't speak to why they can't be mandatory. I think that's probably a better question for the delegates that are on the panel with us today. But I can speak to the debate around that issue. I believe they were originally described as, I think the term was politically binding measures back in the second review conference, and there's debate among states parties and other experts as to whether that is an obligation or that language encourages states parties to participate in CBMs. I believe the underlying issue for states parties that view them as voluntary is that there is no legal obligation in the context of the BWC. So I think in order to make them mandatory, it would probably need some kind of legal basis, which I assume would entail a treaty protocol as part of that, as a more comprehensive effort. But the states parties that do view them as an obligation view that political commitment as a commitment nonetheless, and so they participate from that perspective. So there is debate and disagreement among states parties and, again, other experts as to the degree to which they are voluntary or encouraged, or a commitment or an obligation. So as to why states parties have taken that approach, I don't think I can provide insight into that.
Thank you, Matt. Perhaps something you may want to take as well, Alex, but I also have a specific question, or a question which I think is probably best answered by you here as well. So the question in the chat is, what are the reasons for the decrease in submission of CBM reports between 2023 and 2024? And perhaps, as I offer you the floor as well, I wonder whether you could perhaps elaborate on any measures that could be taken to streamline the reporting process, perhaps taking into account some of the points from Samsanuka earlier as well. The screen is yours, Alex.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you for the good questions. First of all, this was, of course, a snapshot in time, what you see on the slide that I presented. And we have, as of today, 60 CBM reports submitted. That is, in fact, 4 more submissions than at the same time I received last year. As indicated in my presentation earlier, states parties do submit throughout the entire calendar year. Hence, this led to a total number of 104 CBM reports, which is the ever highest number of CBM received. And as I mentioned, I think there's ground for optimism that this number can be exceeded given which states parties have submitted thus far. And also, we still expect from regular submitters that they will do so also in 2024. I hope this explains the statistics. On the second question, Jamie, what are options to streamline the reporting process and make it as easy as possible for states parties? I would say there are 4 different options. First of all, there's quite a lot of information already available from other national or international reporting requirements. And I'm referring, for example, to Measure B on disease outbreaks or to Measure E on declarations of legislation, regulations, and other measures. For example, on Measure B, states parties do report domestically on certain diseases and disease outbreaks, and also report to WHO, to the World Organization for Animal Health, or to the FAO. So this data, and some states do so, simply share this information in their CBM reports. On Measure E, on the legislation regulations, I think there's a wealth of information provided by states parties already in the mandatory national reports under Security Council Resolution 1540 and operative paragraph 2. And also there's a lot of data available from WHO's joint external evaluation. And again, there's specific chapters on biosafety, biosecurity, laws and regulations, and supporting documentation. So I think states parties, and again, some states parties do so, just make best use of these data already available. A second point, I think, how to streamline the reporting process, I think, is to simply use web links for information that is already available in the public domain. And as done by some states parties, I think, when reference is made to publication or publication policies under Form A and Form C, or for example, under Form A on legislation, again, to make reference to national or international legislative databases. Third point, to streamline data collection and submission, I think, across different treaties or instruments. And I already mentioned the joint external evaluations, the IHR states party self-assessment annual reports, or Security Council Resolution 1540, I think, to make best use of this data. And last but not least, I think an option, this depends very much on the national circumstances, to take advantage on already existing interagency coordination structures and mechanisms.
Thank you very much, Alex. That's a really useful, comprehensive answer as well, so thank you. Perhaps I could turn to you now, Lebogang, and I'd also welcome your comments on the politically binding mandatory distinction, whether you have any thoughts on that from your experience in BWC discussions. But also I'd be interested to get your views on what would be the most important advice that you would give to officers from another states party that are starting on that process of submitting CBMs for the first time. If there are 2 or 3 things you could say, do this or really don't do that, what do you have to say? And the screen is yours, Lebogang.
Thanks, Jamie. And I think Matthew has already covered the issue around politically binding and legally binding. But just to add on to what he said, and just to also answer the question that was raised. So the issue with confidence building measures is that it is not a requirement that is specifically stipulated on the convention. So it's submission. So it is, the convention doesn't explicitly say that states parties need to submit confidence building measures. And that's where we find ourselves in a situation where we're talking about states parties are legally obliged to submit confidence building measures, or whether it's just a political commitment, because we all agreed as states parties that there could be benefit to establishing such a mechanism, and hence we should submit. So that's where the issues are around it. And I think also that some aspect of it could also be linked to the submission as well. it also depends on how a state party views CBMs. So what we need to consider now is if a state party views CBMs as something that is voluntary, would they actually go to an extent of submitting or putting in the effort to actually submit the forms? Because in the beginning, as you highlighted, it is quite an effort in the beginning, but there are mechanisms that are there to actually assist state parties with the compilation or coordination of the forms itself. So I think when we talk about issues related to quantity, well, the quantity of submission of CBMs, I think that's another aspect that we need to consider. So to answer the question that that was in the chat, and because of that, let me just look at the wording that they had said. They cannot be made mandatory because they're not explicitly stipulated in the convention. And hence, Matthew had mentioned that if such a route had to be followed, then a legally binding treaty would have to be discussed, where we would cover confidence building measures. But then obviously, I think that if we're going to, the format would have to change. So whether we're going to say that there are declarations, but the declarations would pretty much, in my view, cover more or less the same elements that are in the CBMs and probably more. But then in order to make them mandatory or legally binding, that would be addressed by a legally binding treaty that would cover that. And I think until such a time where that happens, we're now in this situation where it is viewed as voluntary by some states party, but it is actually a political commitment because it's something that we as state parties agreed to its benefits and its submission. And to answer the other question that you raised, Jamie, I think it is just to start. And also, I also highlighted well, the key mechanism, or at least what helps in my presentation to start. And in order for you to start the process, somebody needs to be identified who's going to start the process. So we have a situation where some countries have not nominated a national contact point. Never mind national focal points that are designated to actually provide information that goes into the forms. But I just want to highlight the importance of identifying or designating a person. Firstly, designating a national contact point that is at least going to lead the process of, one, identifying the national stakeholders that need to give you information that goes into the forms, and of course, starting that process and coordinating it as well. And I also want to add on to what I think Alex said, that we all have different national systems. We have a system where we have a national authority, and national authority has established a separate committee. In some countries, it works for them to have a national focal point, a national contact point, and they have, well, a national contact point can be in your Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and then they have designated different national contact points. They don't necessarily have a forum, a formally established forum per se, but they've nominated or designated different national stakeholders that will be able to give them with that information. But another thing that can happen is it's also make use of existing forums that are there that might be similar, because they could be forums like your One Health forums that are there. I know there's some people that would prefer to possibly use those. If there are existing forums in your country that you can use to assist with the CBM, it would help to also make use of that. But I think what's important as well is, even if you use those forums, it's important to start with awareness raising. So you need to arrange some sort of engagement where the people that you have identified are now made aware of what the BWC is and what the relevant commitments are. It makes it easier when national stakeholders actually understand why they need to provide you with information. And in this regards, there's several initiatives that UNODA has that assist state parties on a national level with that. So identify a person who's going to be responsible, identify departments and national focal point, possibly starts with having an awareness raising where you actually inform them about BWC and why they need to give you information into the forms. And in that regard, you can contact UNODA, or you can contact the ISU about the different mechanisms that are there or different initiatives that are there. But I think the whole point is just to start. And in the beginning, it doesn't have to be perfect. You will build it up with time, but just start.
Thank you. I think it's a really helpful checklist to anybody preparing to do this. So thank you so much, Lebogang. I'm conscious Phihlela is patiently waiting with some closing remarks for us, but I do want to turn to some Sanook as well. And there's a couple of questions in the chat, but one I wanted to put to you particularly is your advice to a delegate or indeed to the working group on steps that should be taken. And also if you have any thoughts on other efforts besides CBMs to support transparency efforts. I mean, so there's two there for you and the screen is yours, Sanook.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you for your question. I think what I just heard from the colleague from Johns Hopkins and also the colleague from South Africa is very helpful as well. And I think in terms of transparency mechanism, I think first of all, that state party need to transparent and open to work together. That as we all know that why the CBM is very important and we should be able to exchange informations among the state party and even those, for an example, like the small state like my country, even though we don't have much that relate to the particular issue that to share, but if you're willing to open and work cooperation among the state party, I think it is also be a good step that we can engage to work together and also that to continue cooperation with the international organization is also very important as well, not only for the state party, but also the international organization that who particular working in the related issue as well, and also the some exchange the lesson learned that also can be one of the step that to keep some especially for the developing country that sometimes they still face some challenge and how they will be able to work with other developed country that they already have a very good mechanism on this work as well. I hope this can share some of my thought for the delegations as well. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sanook. And now I'm conscious of the time, so without further ado, perhaps I can turn to you and Phihlela for some closing remarks from the friend of the chair. Please, the screen's yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon or hello everyone in the different time zones. And I would like to say a few words on behalf of the friends of the chair, that is Laurent Masmejan from Switzerland and myself from Peru. First of all, we'd like to express our gratitude to Ambassador Damico for being with us, for his leadership on the working group, and also for his opening remarks. Of course, I would also express our gratitude to all speakers today. Matthew from Johns Hopkins, who I met personally also recently last year. Of course, the ISU and our colleagues Lebogang from South Africa and Sanook from Lao PDR, who I met years ago in a previous posting. I wanted to very briefly comment on the importance of the insights that you have kindly shared with us. I am sure this will contribute to the success of the working group as a whole, and also in particular the progress within the framework of discussions on confidence building measures and transparency. I will not aim at summing up all the very thought-provoking elements that have been shared, for instance, by Alex on the new CBM platform and its main features and the trends. Of course, the very important and valuable research paper produced by Matthew and his colleagues from the Johns Hopkins, with which I had the opportunity to contribute myself also as one of the testimonies shared. And of course, coming from Peru, a developing country, I have been also very interested in the lessons learned and best practices kindly shared by our colleagues from South Africa and now PDR. I could reflect the experience of my own country from Latin America with regards to the difficulties concerning, for instance, agency coordination and the importance of raising awareness within different agencies in the national administrations. Also in countries where perhaps the perception of the risk of bio threats or bioterrorism is lower than in other countries, but where you had very important impacts of biosafety and the threats of a new pandemic. So with that, I would just also like to perhaps take this opportunity to tell you a little bit, very briefly, what we are planning as we move forward as Friends of the Chair on CBMs and transparency. We, as Friends of the Chair, intend to hold informal consultation meetings in early June. It's going to be virtual, and you will have be informed about the dates in due course. And of course, this would be an opportunity to build upon our discussions last year in the working group in December and prior to our next full meeting that will take place in December 2024. So we thought it would be timely to get our collective efforts think on our specific topic before the meeting in August also of the working group. And then that will be all. I just wanted once again to thank all speakers. Your expertise and perspectives have provided really invaluable insights as we prepare for the upcoming meeting of the working group. Let us continue to collaborate and engage in constructive dialogue to uphold the principles of the Convention. And thank you once again for your commitment to this critical issue. And that will be all from my side. I know James has some very important message to share.
Thank you very much, Angel. I also noticed, Ambassador Damico, you put your screen on. Did you wish to say anything in terms of closing remarks? The screen is yours if you wish, sir.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, just very briefly to thank you for this very opportune event. I think that you have very important perspectives, and we can draw important lessons that might guide us in the debate to improve the CBM process and actually also think about the larger political implications. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Just before closing, I am conscious we are fashionably over time, but if I could encourage you to complete the online feedback form. It does only take a couple of minutes. It is anonymous and it can be very helpful for us. I also want to reiterate the thanks expressed by others as well, to our colleagues in UNODA, to the Friends of the Chair, to all the speakers, and to Ambassador Damico and his team. But also my thanks to those colleagues who have supported the production of this event from behind the scenes, so Maria and Clarice, for all your help with this. And thank you to all of you for taking the time to join us online. We hope to see you for the next event. Next Friends of the Chair webinar series event will take place on Wednesday, that's the 8th of May, and that will look at national implementation. So I hope to see some of you there. If you do have ideas or other things within the BWC context you think it would be useful to look at, we'd also welcome your insights or thoughts there as well. And with that, have a good afternoon to those of you here in Geneva, or a good night, day to the rest of you. And thank you very much again for your time.